Hey, it's Rob Hefner here for the town of Pinetop-Lakeside with the talk of the town, continuing on our topics regarding the land use map and referendum based around that. Today, I have with me Mr. Sandy Shiff. Hi, sir. How are you doing today?
Fine, thanks.
So give me a little understanding, and of the listeners out there, why are we talking to you in regard to land use map and the areas over near the Rim Trail?
That's a great question. First of all, I'm a member of the Lions Club. My dad and my mother were Lions, and so I was kind of raised inside the Lions organization. We're the world's largest service organization, and in particular, there was, over 60 years ago, a camp for disabled kids and adults was started on U.S. Forest Service property in the town of what now has become Pinetop. So that's why I got involved. And at the time, almost 25 years ago, the camp was approached by the Forest Service, and they said, you guys are the oldest people, the people that have been on this property the longest under a special use permit with the Forest Service. And a special use permit is no different than if you or I went to camp on Forest Service land. Now you need some kind of a use permit for the day or for the weekend. So they were awarded this because they operated a camp for disabled kids, they being the camp itself. And the camp was started by Lions, and so it became what we call a state project of the Lions. So all the clubs in the state of Arizona would support it. And as donations came in, they grew the camp onto what is now about a 40-acre footprint right on 260, annexed by the town of Pinetop. So as a member of the Lions Foundation, we are also a state project that's over 60 years old. And the Lions Foundation was basically the property managers for Lions properties. So that's how I became involved at the time that the Forest Service approached the folks from Camp Tatiyee, who had the special use permit, and said, you should consider a land exchange. The camp came to us as the property managers and said, we're not really prepared to take on this task, a major capital campaign. Would you guys help us? So that's how I got involved. I had served on the board, and I'd filled the shoes of my father, who before me had served on the board. That's pretty much why you're talking to me now.
Okay, so and
the background.
When we talk about, and of course, the town is in 1984. The communities of Lakeside and Pinetop joined together and incorporated as the town of Pinetop-Lakeside. And as you said, part of one of the things that they did was they annexed that area after it came out of a land swap with the United States Forest Service, and you and other partners. And when you guys looked at, when they came to you and said, let's do a land swap or let's do this, the Lions, and I want to differentiate so people understand, the Lions Foundation is the landowner, correct?
Yes, that's correct. In other words, the Forest Service calls it a land exchange because no one, otherwise wealthy people would just reach into their pockets and buy land, and That's not what they want. So under a land exchange, for those who don't know, you have to come up with an appraised value of the land you want, and then you have to exchange land of equal value that's within the Forest Service, so it benefits both sides. And what the Lions Foundation is, we were mostly professionals, experienced business people or retired business people, we took on the challenge of what it would take to rearrange our board and attract the monies to meet that target value with the Forest Service, and then check all the boxes and complete the land exchange with the Forest Service.
Right. Now, the property you're on is like 40 acres. The entire area was like 360, I think, originally. Is that somewhere accurate?
Yeah, the original, let's call it the island within the Forest Service.
Yeah.
It was 344 acres.
Okay.
And running across that island, as I'm calling it, were easements. There were there were power lines, utility lines, there was water trails, there was different things, and those all have to be figured in on that property and excluded from property that a private person could develop. They were grandfathered in.
Yeah. So you didn't have enough land elsewhere or anything like that as the Lions Foundation to be able to do this. So you engaged some partners. How did that come about?
Yeah, well, at the time, the appraised value was a little more north of $2 million, and they were told us it would take about 3 years, and it ended up taking over 20 years. So at some point, as the value of the land increased, we hit a wall, and we had to find somebody who had an equal interest. So we reached out and found a family that had property up there that also wanted to get involved in a land exchange, and we were introduced to them through folks up in the northern part of Arizona, and we worked out an agreement that we would put up the land we had acquired, which was north of $2 million in value, and they would put up their land, because at the time you had to have more than the Forest Service asked. Right. Otherwise you'd fall short. So that's how we took on a strategic partner. Yes.
Okay. And that, as we've identified in another show, was the Coate family who stepped in. And you guys joined together because you had sort of a similar vision of what that land use ultimately would be. Is that correct?
Right. Well, the simplest way to describe it is Pinetop is a very special place. For me, as a native Tucsonan, and somebody who's traveled up there pretending to be able to fish for decades. And also because the camp had existed and it was special, my wife and I have a young son who's disabled, so we wanted to support the camp. That was later. And then also, because of the amount of money, it's the largest capital campaign together with our partner. We wanted to preserve the forest. We wanted to make sure that it was maintained and it was beautiful, and improve the value of the land, and also, help the community of Pinetop-Lakeside to keep it that pristine, beautiful place that we want it to remain. So we both had similar interests. The Coate family is also from Tucson. They have a large, several hundred acres of probably the number one guest ranch, dude ranch, they used to call it in the United States, right here in Tucson. It's amazing, called Tanque Verde Guest Ranch. So it was a great partner, and my family and their family had grown up here. So it was just a wonderful match that with what they had and what we had, we both felt comfortable that we could complete the exchange, and it worked out that way.
Okay. So 50 some years ago when they started the camp here, the area was different. The amount of people that were here was different. The climate was different as far as businesses availability and all of those kind of things. Did you imagine that the camp was always going to be the camp there in that location? Is that something that you'd envisioned then, that it was always going to be the camp there?
Well, that's a great question, because when you sit down and try to plan something like this out, one of the first questions you're going to ask is, if we take this on and we complete this exchange, what is the best use of this land? And at the time it was founded, it was in the middle of basically nowhere with a simple road, and they, a half dozen people lit a fire on a campfire and slept in sleeping bags under the stars. And this is what they wanted to offer, an experience for folks, disabled folks that never get to enjoy or have the freedom or independence to do what most of us did growing up, especially in the summer when it's ungodly hot in Tucson and Phoenix. So that is what they wanted to preserve when they had the camp. But the minute the Forest Service came to us, basically, it was the Forest Service that wanted this exchange because it was an island that didn't make sense for them to maintain.
Right.
So then LFA was the LFA is the Lions Foundation of Arizona. We started the process of the land exchange. And so when you bring in a private party like the Coate family, that was needed and essential. The development was always considered at some point whether it was going to be our task and our success or someone else that stepped in if we didn't do it. There would be commercial development, there would be residential development, it would be within the woods, the forest, and it made sense that with our camp there, we were the best organization within the Lions of Arizona, the Foundation of Arizona, Lions Foundation of Arizona to complete the deal. So from the beginning, development was always considered, and part of the deal. It's, if we hadn't finished the exchange, there likely would not be a Camp Grace, a Camp Tatiyee, the Rim Trail as it's now preserved. That probably wouldn't have been achieved. So Lions Foundation is the owners, and Camp Tatiyee, under the special use permit and now through a lease, they legally are a tenant under the lease on Lions property that's owned and managed by the Lions Foundation.
So the Lions Foundation owns it. The maybe local Lions Club leases it. Would that be a fair?
Well, the state project of the camp. Think of the Camp Tatiyee as a business.
Yes.
That is leasing the space of nearly 40 acres to operate their summer camp for disabled folks.
This is the end of segment 1 of 3 for the Lions Club Foundation Speaks about the land use map. I'm Rob Hefner for Talk of the Town, Town of Pinetop-Lakeside.